We are live. Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. If this is your first webinar with us, extra special, thank you. I know there's a million and one things vying for your attention these days, and we don't take it lightly that you spend an hour of your time with us. So thank you. If you're a Sales Hacker OG, welcome back. We have a really great conversation lined up today. And the title of this one is 3 Pillars that Autodesk, Upland, and TELUS use to maximize revenue growth in 2021. 3 incredibly successful companies, 3 companies that are growing very fast. And we're going to dissect all the different ways that they're maximizing revenue, putting people first, and we'll probably do a bit of a look back on the dreaded year of 2020. Some of the learnings, there were a laundry list of learnings, but it's going to be a fun one. And 2 quick housekeeping items before I do introduce my great guests. Number 1, these are always recorded. So if you have to hop off, you got a one-on-one with your manager, you got to close a deal, whatever it is, maybe your kid or your dog is yelling in the back. It's all good. We'll have this in your inbox within about 24 hours. And then number 2 is these conversations are for the community. So we have some things we want to get through and some topics we want to discuss. But if there's some things that are on your mind, things that you're currently struggling with, we want you to lead the conversation. So you can go down to the chat feature, introduce yourself, your name, your title. Would love to see who we're rocking with. And then if you have any questions, I would ask you to use the Q&A feature also at the bottom. I'll be manning that and getting to any relevant ones as they come. And I think that's it. That's the boring stuff out of the way. Now I get to introduce my guests. I am joined first by Adrienne Walker, who is the Director of Sales and Success Effectiveness at Autodesk. Adrienne, welcome to the Sales Hacker community.
Thanks very much. It's nice to be here. I haven't been on one of these before.
We're excited to have you. And a title doesn't totally do it your career justice. So I always ask this question: what is the superhero origin story of Adrienne? How did you get to work for such a cool, fast-growing company?
I got bought, actually. So I am from a small company in Toronto, coincidentally, since many of you on here are Canadian, and we were bought by Autodesk about almost exactly 15 years ago, and the rest is history. I'm still with Autodesk. I was in sales for 17 years before, doing actually some time in mergers and acquisitions, and then it kind of made sense because when you're on the sales side, you see all of the things that you could be better at. So Sales Enablement was an interesting next step for me.
I love that. So are you Canadian?
I am very Canadian, even though I live in the US.
I think this is the first webinar we've ever had where Canadians outnumber Richard over here. Team
Which
Team
means
Canada.
It's going to be awesome, right?
Awesome. Okay, and then next up we have Paul Bleier. I should know how to pronounce your last name by now. Is it Bleier?
Yes. Yeah.
Bleier. Okay, perfect. Who is the Director of Sales Enablement over at TELUS, obviously massive company. So welcome, Paul. And if you don't mind giving the 2-minute superhero origin story, how'd you get to TELUS?
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. I'm happy to be here. So been at TELUS coming up on my 10-year anniversary. So not 15 yet, Adrienne, but coming up close to that. 10 years at TELUS. My background, Scott, a little bit unconventional in how I kind of got into the enablement space. My background's in training and organizational development. And so I learned a lot about instructional design, coaching, leadership development, competencies. Worked for a number of years for a big consulting firm, Fortune 100 companies. But really, wanted to go in-house and kind of understand one company culture and not pass projects off and not see the outcome a year later, 2 years later. And so I landed at TELUS and I was a learning consultant there for a couple of years in our customer solutions group. And then about 5 years ago, I got an amazing opportunity to come and help our sales organization standardize our onboarding programs and our career development programs, and really build TELUS Sales Academy. And as I told you once last year, Scott, I think sales is one of the most amazing professions that there is out there. It's so rewarding, especially when you're in enablement, because you can actually see the impact that you have on the day-to-day lives of frontline salespeople and their leaders. And couldn't be more happy to be in the role I am today.
I love it. So that is also rare. Not only do we have a vast number of Canadians on this webinar, but it's also uncommon to have someone who's tenured 15 years and then tenured 10 years. I feel like that's pretty uncommon these days. A lot of people are jumping around every 2, 3, 4 years. So that's interesting and exciting to understand some of the learnings of that, because you really get to know a system, a process, the people when you're around that long. Last, but definitely not least, I didn't leave you last just because you're not Canadian, Richard. Welcome to the Sales Hacker community. Richard is the Chief Revenue Officer at Upland Software. Again, such a successful company, public company. I think I bought some Upland stock just the other day, actually. It's performing well. But Richard, welcome. How did you get to be a CRO at such an incredible company?
Yeah, Scott, great to be here. Like Adrienne, I was acquired. So Upland, as you might know, is a pretty unique model. We've built this organization as this wonderful accretive growth engine. And my charter, having more recently taken on the CR role, is to really facilitate that cross-sell motion within the organization. So that's why today's topic is so germane. But I've been in the software space for coming up on 20 years right now. I had a brief stint in the environmental technology space before getting wise and realizing software was a far more lucrative way to make a living. So I've got a bit of an eclectic background. Been in small venture-backed shops, a few that have had some success, one pre-IPO, post-IPO, sale to IBM. So I've seen a lot of different models and a lot of different ways in which you can align revenue teams to meet goals and objectives. So I've been at Upland for a couple years now. Company I was with, Capost, was acquired, and then I ran a team for about a year, and then since January I took on the CRO role here.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I always try and drill down on some of these terms because they mean different things to different people sometimes. So your focus right now is on cross-sell. When you think of cross-sell, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. Here at Upland, we've got about 10,000 customers. About 1,500 of them are what we deem as enterprise, so bigger shops that are spending a significant amount of money with us. And then even the top 75 platinum that are roughly 36% of our 300 million in revenue. And for us, if you look at it, each of those has on average only 1.2 Upland products. And even today, we announced the acquisition of a new company, Blue Vein. We're up to 27 different products right now. So the fact that an average Upland customer only has 1.2, there's a ton of white space, ton of headroom for us to get at a more thoughtful, deliberate sales motion, and that's the charter. So last year, about 5% of our revenue was in and around a cross-sell revenue, a designation of selling into our install base a different product. And this year, our goal is north of 20%.
Wow. In an exciting time. I am being a leader focused on that. When you look at 1.2 and you have 27 products to sell, that's an exciting time.
There is unbridled headroom here. So we've plenty of opportunity to get this motion right and really nail down the process. So these companies A blue Venn is, fits nicely into a category that is a high growth and high potential cross-sell category for us in the customer experience arena. And so these deliberate plays that we're doing from a cross-sell standpoint are going to yield some pretty exciting outcomes for us. So yeah, we can get into some of the details as the conversation unfolds here.
Absolutely. And before we dive fully into it, I want to do a couple polls. It's always great to get a pulse check on the room, help us frame up the conversation a little bit. Let's start with, I'm going to launch this one now. What industry are you in? This will be helpful. I'm guessing we're typically pretty strong in tech on Sales Hacker. Got some telco, manufacturing. All right, we'll give it 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So as predicted, let's share those results. So heavy on the technology side, 68% coming from technology, 13% coming from telco, 11% manufacturing, 4% healthcare, and 4% FinServe. That is very good to know. Thank you for that. And then I want to do one more. Let me see. Okay. This is a big one too. What is your biggest sales challenge for 2021? We put 4 options. If you don't see the option, something else is on your mind, just feel free to chat it in. Is it account retention, account expansion, new customer acquisition, or customer satisfaction? Adrienne, any guesses as to where we'll land here?
I have to believe expansion, because expansion is certainly where we are focused right now. So we'll see.
Yeah, Paul, do you think it's going to be expansion as well?
Yeah, I think it's going to be either new customer acquisition or account expansion. I think it's going to be evenly distributed, probably across those 2.
Yeah. And when we were doing some prep for this, there was a fact that analysts estimate that 70 to 80% of the average company's annual revenue is going to come from existing customers, which is crazy high amount. All right, we'll stop that one. Account retention, 4%, very little. Account expansion is 35. New customer acquisition was the biggest one by a decent margin at 59%. So adding those net new logos, people are struggling with. It might be the nature of our audience, but I'll share those there. And we will do one final one, and then we'll get into it. Let's actually do this one. What's the size of your sales team? That will help us also kind of frame up if we're talking primarily to startups, bigger companies.
I think this is interesting, going back to the previous question. So, our organization's been around a long time. I think we're well over 80% of our business coming from existing customers. So when I think of revenue growth, I very much think of account expansion, much more so than new. But I can totally understand newer organizations having a different perspective.
That is a great point. It's almost like there's a maturity model that it kind of starts scaling. Customer acquisition goes down and retention and cross-sell upsell goes up. And that makes sense, because if I end this poll here, 62% in that 0 to 50 range. So startups, you gotta hustle. You gotta get those new logos in the door. 13% of 50 to 100, 8% of 100 to 200, and then making up the rest, 200 to 500 plus, is about 18% with those 2. Okay, very helpful. We might do a couple more polls later on, but let's dive into it. And true to what I said at the beginning, we have some great questions coming in. So I'm going to just forget about the questions that I had in front of me, and let's dive into it, because people have challenges, people have questions. Bilal is joining us. Bilal is a friend of mine and a great sales leader, and he always has good questions. So I'm going to go to his first. And Paul, I think I'll start with you on this one. how do you manage the friction between enablement and sales manager responsibilities? How do you work with your sales management at TELUS to get them bought into what you're doing? You might be pushing them to institute new things, and like, I have enough on my plate. I don't want to do this other one-on-one coaching thing you're telling me to do. How do you manage that friction?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Bilal. And the way I would approach it would be, I think to our enablement teams across TELUS, voice of sales is so important, Scott, all the time in everything we do. And the friction, the friction will come if you don't involve them early and often in the design and rollout of a new program, a new process. And that was key to our learning and our evolution of an enablement team at TELUS over the last 5 years is when we set out to kind of build our standard sales operating environment and create the business rules for funnel coaching or account plans discussions or opportunity management. I remember back to those early days and we reduced the friction because we brought the sales VPs in, we brought the sales directors in, we brought high performing sales professionals into those workshops and those conversations. And we co-created the business rules together, right? And I mean, and it was an iterative process. So, if enablement isn't bringing leaders in to get their feedback on what actually works or doesn't work day in, day out, you're going to inevitably see that friction. And it's worked pretty well because, I mean, when I look at the trust and credibility that all of our enablement practitioners at TELUS have with our senior leaders across the business today, they come to us with their problems. And they look to us more as a consultant and an advisor as opposed to just a function that pumps out programs, right? And I think that's when you've eliminated the friction, is when you've got that trust and that credibility.
Yeah, I think one of the key words you said there was co-create, right? It's not you in an ivory tower creating the systems and then pushing them down to the managers. They're bubbling up ideas, you're co-creating and then dispersing them. I think that's great. Adrian, do you see friction today? And if so, how do you navigate that? Competing priorities sometimes.
Sure. Can I just say ditto to what Paul said? I thought it was really well said, but we do something similar. We're right in the middle of a very long virtual sales kickoff right now. And I think we had over 120 sales leaders and sales people involved in the content and delivery of sales kickoff this year, which, I mean, we have the organization I'm in, our global sales organization is 3,300 people strong. So that gives you a sense of what percentage of people are actually directly involved. But we do that with every program we roll out, every initiative, because if they're not involved, if they don't feel a sense of ownership, then they're not going to buy in. The other thing that we've done, and you touched on coaching right at the beginning of your question, we actually have instituted, as of about 2 years ago, a group of sales coaches that report into my organization, but that support the efforts of our frontline sales managers, because we found that frontline sales managers, that is a tough gig, right? And so giving them some support and helping them coach better as well has really proven to better the partnership, I guess, between my organization and sales leadership.
That's super interesting. I want to double click on that. So if I'm hearing that right, so you have your frontline managers, they've got a million and one, I agree, it's a tough gig. They got 1,000,001 things going on. They're always going to be focused on that monthly or quarterly number first, because that's what they're paid on. That's their KPIs. And so at least in my experience, the one-on-one coaching that's not just coaching to the deal is the first thing that slips, right? That's the thing that, sorry, too busy, we'll get to it next week.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you have coaches that report into enablement, that's their sole function is to go out there and do coaching training. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So we started I would call it a pilot, a couple of years ago in inside sales, because that's where we were seeing the highest ratio of individual contributors to managers. And this year, we actually hired 2 people to do named account coaching, which you can imagine, very different persona, but it's been really, really effective because they have 2 benefits. They're looking at deals and customer planning in a different way, kind of a little bit from the outside, but also they're acting as almost like a mentor to your salespeople. And sometimes, you know, as much as you want your managers to have that feeling with their people, it's hard because you still control how they get paid and their quota and their performance reviews. My coaches don't. And so it feels like a really great partnership for those that are taking advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are those? What do you call that? Like, what's their title?
It is sales coach.
Sales coach. Cool.
Yeah.
Adrienne, what you just described is key. We actually have a similar function at TELUS. It doesn't sit within my team, but it sits under the VPs of sales, and they've got directors that manage what we call sales quality and coaches. And it's their responsibility to kind of take some of the best practices from our center of excellence on our team nationally and drive it into the sales manager weekly meetings and work with each manager one-on-one. And it's been a highly successful project, as I'm sure you're seeing as well, because the managers feel they've got that executive coach, right, on their side that's looking at the whole team, not just the number of that team, right? And so I'm so happy to hear that you're doing that as well. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I see a question in the chat, which I think is interesting. What's the background of your coaches, Paul?
So most of our sales quality coaches are ex-sales professionals that have given up the bag and want to mentor and coach others to high performance.
Yeah, that's exactly what ours is as well. In fact, we tested out a couple of people that were more coaches, executive coaches, but they didn't necessarily have the sales background. It did not. Those ex-sales people that really loved mentoring their peers, even when they were in the job, are amazing at it because they get the conversations with the customers, they get the focus on the customer, but they also get the challenges that the individual reps are having. So it's good to hear that you've got the same structure, same background.
Yeah, that's huge. I like that a lot. Richard, do you have anything like that? Do you have sales coaches? I know that's not super common, but how are you making sure, I guess, coaching is getting done if you don't have it?
Here's the thing. We're a little scrappier than these nice, well-established organizations. Think about the culmination of 27 different products in a very decentralized, historic operating model, kind of being munged together in this one beautifully orchestrated big system. We have just limited sales enablement resources. It's, for us, a function of not friction, just priority. Like, what are the top 2 or 3 things that we can handle at any given time? How do we put that directive energy towards that, make sure we're aligned on what the outcome looks like, and then do fewer things, but do them better? And so the objective here is to lay that foundational, repeatable infrastructure on a sales enablement standpoint. And we have one coach across about 160 individual contributors and about a dozen or so managers. So that is our voice of sales right now into that mode. So it's a little bit of a scrappier operating model, but it's less about friction. It's more about priority in our shop.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I want to go back to you, Richard. On I'll leave this sort of intentionally broad. So I know when we were breaking this down, what we want to talk about, obviously the theme is revenue growth. And Upland breaks that down into, people, problems, and potential, which is cool. I've heard the people, process, technology, the people, problems, potential. I think it's a really interesting framework. What does that mean to you? What are you looking at?
Yeah. That's for us. You think about the people challenge that we're up against right now in this selling environment, the extension of that craziness in 2020 into the new year, the disruption that have occurred in these larger B2B shops. There's been staffing changes, there's been shifting priorities, there's reorgs and so forth. So just getting our arms around who's who and what their role and responsibility within the org is, and then creating for us is a visual mapping of that, and say, who are the people that are influencers that can approve and are key decision makers as part of a complex B2B process, and just getting the revenue team, these account managers in this named account model, right? We're chasing big land and expand deals that might have 10 to 15 different stakeholders as part of a considered purchase. Who is really at the epicenter of that? How do we ensure that we've got the right relationship strategy to get at them and build the relationships that matter, right? So this notion of relationship mapping is critical to understand the people side of it. And paramount to that is what's important to these people. What are their care abouts? What's top of mind for them? What are the macro goals of the organization? What are the pressures they're facing? What do they need to act on internally and externally to make stuff happen? And what are those initiatives that are at play within this org? And what are the obstacles that they're needing to overcome? So these are insights. This is a framework for capturing what those problems look like. So you got the people that correlate to some type of challenge that they're looking to overcome and trying to drive a different outcome. And then that potential is really, how do you unlock the mapping of what we bring to the market, which is vast, to what they're looking to solve. And that white space, that open territory, that addressable market within these major accounts are the very things that we're looking to try to ensure that we're talking to these right people, that our solutions align, or in some cases don't align, right? We're not trying to force fit or jam something that they really don't want or need. But when you take those in aggregate, that's the underpinning of kind of a cohesive account strategy and aligning the revenue team. You think about all these players that we've got in a complex selling environment. You certainly have the seller. We've instituted a global account structure that is focusing on the top, call it 175 major accounts within Upland. So they're likely involved in some of these bigger accounts. You got a customer success person, you've got product marketing, you've got, hopefully somebody from product and engineering that's paying attention. And this is the kind of framework, the infrastructure that we bring together, an account plan where we can really map out what we're hoping to accomplish, both from a people standpoint, who's got the action items around getting at these relationships and ensuring that we've got coverage, appropriate, broader coverage, that we're solving the problems, and that we've identified the white space that's going to generate the cross sell. So again, it's that account holistic view is how we look at the business, and frankly, we're embarking on this journey, and we certainly haven't arrived. And in fact, Adrienne and I were talking before a little bit, and one thing I really teed on with her is like, it's not an account plan, it's not a static artifact. It's this idea of, it's a verb, it's account planning, it's a living, breathing, iterative approach. And it really resonated with me because that's kind of how we view the world as well. So I don't know, Adrienne, not take over your role, Scott, but Adrienne, I'd love to hear more specifically about that, because the
less I have to do, the better. So just talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, we've been doing, call it account planning for years and years and years. This is even back when I was in sales 10 years ago. But we had a couple of problems with account planning. One was that our account owners, our account execs, always felt like it was an administrative task rather than really a revenue generating activity. And so, Richard, just as you said, and actually I stole/borrowed this from one of the enablement directors over at Salesforce, because she shared that she'd had the same problem. And they started talking about planning instead of the plan, right? The verb versus the noun. And it really makes a difference, because it's about something that you're doing all the time. And it is an iterative process. It's not, as many of our reps originally saw it, a thing that you fill out and stick in a drawer or, file somewhere and forget about for the next year. And so that was a huge mind shift. For us, a lot of this is about the cultural shift in how our sellers look at their role. So that was one change. And similar to that change, we realized, in fact, Richard, when we rolled out the some of the technology that Upland bought a couple of years ago, the Altify technology, we realized that our original structure of rolling it out primarily to our sellers was not doing our account teams any favors, because it made the sellers feel as though they had to fill out the stuff instead of having a discussion with their account team and having everybody collaborate. And so we found that changing that and making the relationship maps and the insight maps available and visible to everyone has made a huge difference in that collaboration. So I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. So, our follow-up question to that: Are the account planning, not account plans, account planning, is that still done primarily from the AE, or do they have a counterpart that will take that admin task out of their hands now?
We don't consider it admin tasks anymore. So, depending on the segment, in our named account space, we can have up to 10 people working on what we have now rebranded as customer plans, because we also wanted to make everyone really think about the fact that this is about the customer and the outcomes the customer is trying to achieve. This is not about what we are trying to sell. And okay, yeah, of course we have to sell stuff. But if we focus it on the customer, we're going to be more successful. And so if you think about those 10 people or more that are involved in account plan and named accounts, or if you think about the 5 or 6 that are involved in our mid-market space, each one of them is responsible for pieces. They're responsible depending on the account, depending on the relationships we have with the account, depending on whether they're a growth account or an account that we're kind of maintaining right now. There's a lot of variability, but the orchestration is owned by the account exec, but the work is parsed out amongst the group depending on who can do what best. And that's going to look different for every account.
Yeah, that makes sense. Paul, you have something to add on top?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple different things. So I think that's the biggest mindset shift, right? There's two mindset shifts. I think that one that I want to touch on that Adrienne just mentioned. One is it's not just the account executive's responsibility, number one, for planning, customer planning. I love that, by the way, customer planning. They have to involve the extended team, and that's been our biggest challenge as well, is getting the engineers in, getting the sales specialists in, getting the solution architects in, getting the leaders, everybody in, VPs in, viewing these multi-million-dollar account plans. They're not alone. It's a team sport, and it's iterative, and it's never finished. I think that's one mindset shift. The second, as Adrienne touched on, is customer point of view, right? And I think for a lot of sales executives that do sales planning, sometimes they're doing it from their point of view. They're not thinking about the relationship map, the decision makers on that relationship map, and what's important to Richard as the CRO of that organization versus the VP of HR within that organization. They probably have different pressures and goals that they're each trying to hit, that maybe your solution can help solve, right? And so the insight map is one of the most powerful pieces of the planning process. And I know for the last 5 minutes or so, we've been talking about large named accounts, But I want to give, for those on the call, because we do have a lot of startups on the call today, I do want to say that this process we're talking about also can translate and transfer down to smaller accounts and larger, reps that have larger territories. And we're actually doing that, Adrienne, in our mid-market small space, where a typical sales executive might have 200 accounts in their territory. And so they're taking the best principles of planning that looks at people and problems, and we're pulling out that concept, and we're teaching that manager and that team to think about the customer point of view when you're qualifying opportunities and you're calling into accounts. And so everything we just talked about, I think, applies to all different segments within an organization, not just the large, top 100 enterprise named accounts as well.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
Yeah. Two things there, Paul. You mentioned insight maps. What's the definition of an insight map? I'm not familiar with that.
So an insight map is something that always looks at the customer's goals first, right? The pressures of those, impacting the achievement of those goals, right? And then in terms of what initiatives are actually in flight within that customer's organization that are trying to tackle those big rocks, right? And what's really interesting about the insight map is, if you think about it, is, you could have multiple decision makers that have multiple goals, and that would inform how wide and deep you go within that customer account, right? Who are you talking to? And that goes back to what we're talking about today, which is expanding revenue within existing accounts. And an example and story I'll share is, a huge part of TELUS is our health division. And we're driving a lot of virtual care solutions on our network to help organizations manage the health and wellness of their employees. That's a huge cross-sell opportunity for our traditional sales executive that's selling our IT solutions and our wireless solutions and our network solutions. But the decision maker that's going to be caring about, the health and wellness and employee engagement within the organization is a VP of HR. It's not a VP. It's not an IT VP. It's not someone on that traditional tech side. And so on the relationship map, do you have a VP of HR? And if you don't, maybe you want to go and find out who that VP of HR is. That then gets added to the insight map. What are the goals? What is that VP of HR is important to her or him? And then you could start having those strategic conversations with the account team, the greater account team, about how do we get in a meeting? How do we prepare for that meeting? And then how do we show the power of TELUS to help solve not only the VP of IT's problems, but also the VP of HR? And there you have a real example of what we're trying to do at TELUS this year, which is around cross-sell, product intensity, and moving, as Richard said, from that 1.2 per customer to like a 2.3 per customer, because like Richard, we sell hundreds of different things across our product portfolios and solution portfolios at TELUS.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting. We may have to get you to go deeper on insight maps, maybe on a separate blog post or something. I think that's super interesting. I would love to see that more visually. Okay, and then I think also relationship maps. So it's thrown around a lot. We've talked about it a lot. I think they're evolving. It used to just kind of be a tree of the organization, but through LinkedIn, we're able to map a lot of our internal relationships to these other companies much better than we ever have before. Richard, what does a relationship map look like to you? What kind of things are you including in it?
Yeah, and just to build on some of the comments earlier, it includes those things that are the key careabouts, the key goals, and the pressures. And it aligns those insights that you've gained as part of that. Think of an insight map real quick as a framework for discovery. And it really comes alive when you can actually play that back using this framework. And we have a ton of success even turning the screen around and saying, here's how we're kind of thinking about it right now. Have we captured this accurately? Is this a fair representation of what's really happening within your org? And then to your point, who are those people that are held accountable to solve these challenges, or where is it most acute? And can you help us get access to those individuals? Because we've got a capability that can help not only them, but the broader organization as it ladders up to these goals. So it, in conjunction with the insight map, can help navigate that labyrinth of what a relationship map looks like. And you can really figure out who's got power and who's got influence within an organization. And it's not always hierarchical, right? It doesn't just follow this beautiful, top to bottom org chart. It's usually somebody that's wildly persuasive down in this corner and really can influence those individuals to move these initiatives forward to solve these problems. So, if you can figure out who's where and how the buying decision is made, who those not only decision makers are, but who those approvers are, then you can ensure, in a team sport that account planning is, that you've got coverage across all those key individuals. And you're not camping, you're not single threaded on somebody that we all get happy ears around, right? Well, that's great. It sounds like we've got this big opportunity. It really is a way to expand the breadth of influence you have. So it's a great visual representation of that. Like planning it's really relationship mapping. We should rename it, because it is living and breathing. And it is, to me, any sales leader, when they see a relationship map, they'll go, oh, geez, how can we lead without this just fundamental understanding of who we're chasing? And to the earlier comments Adrienne made, and maybe Paul, is, listen, it doesn't apply just to the biggest of big counts. If you're chasing a commercial or a mid-market opportunity, you're going to want to understand who these key players are, what their careabouts are, where and how they make decisions within the organization. This is a great visual representation to get it all on paper, and then share it and use it as part of your planning to achieve your objectives. And just like with an insight map, once you develop that trust, credibility, and rapport with these folks, turning that screen around and sharing it with them, it's like, do I have this right? Is this really how you guys are org? And by and large, you're going to get great reaction feedback. And they go, tell me more about that map. I'd love to learn more about what this means and how I can help you. Usually people, when asked for help, they're going to be willing to help you. So that's a little more detail in the relationship map that we've seen effective as we've been rolling this technology out.
Cool. I like it. So this next question will be a selfish one. So my day job is, I run the strategic engagement division at Outreach, which a lot of that is around relationship mapping and also flipping it internally. And once we understand a relationship map, well, our organizations now are more connected than ever, particularly because people are job hopping all the time. People build brands on LinkedIn. So it's very easy now there's like all these nodes to get to just about any account. Like our engineer could be they could be at his best man at his wedding or something, who's our decision maker. And there's all these and Adrienne, I'll go with you on this question. Are you doing any sort of exercises like that to not only map out the relationships of your strategic accounts, but then flip that internally and try and understand where those connections lie beyond just that, 10-person account team?
So it's a great idea, and not one that we have spent a lot of time with. Our friends at LinkedIn have actually tried to convince us to spend some time doing that, but there are reasons that we have not as yet. But it is a great idea because, we're a, 12, 13,000 person company, and many of us have been here a long, long time. So we have a lot of relationships that may not be that obvious with customers that the account exec who's only been here 2 or 3 years may have no idea about. So it is something that I think we could do better at, for sure. I will say that one of the things I like about the relationship maps from Upland, it's not just the hierarchy, it's also you can see immediately who within those organizations are supporting us. And one of the things that we can certainly be better at is, okay, they're supporting us, but are they supporting me, the account exec, or are they a supporter of, our marketing person, or are they a supporter of somebody else? And it's definitely something we could do much better at.
That's cool. I like that. So what are they actually supporting behind? What is that relationship? Richard, anything to add there? I guess the question is, how are you approaching warm introductions that may be just lying dormant in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, like you, they're, especially in these mature relationships, it's interesting. We've got a unique dynamic here because through this acquisition, some of those product-specific companies have had long-term partnerships and relationships with their install base.
Right.
And then when we bring them together under the Upland fold, they're no longer, product A customers, they're Upland customers. So we're particularly in tune with tapping into that relationship history, that hopefully a solid basis for asking for additional help and support. To us, you've got to earn that right. You've got to be in good footing and in a good place with that organization. So the customer success component is paramount. So you can springboard on that relationship, and that this global account structure is paramount to that. But we're like you. We're thinking about how do we connect the dots with relationship mapping capability integrated within a LinkedIn environment, or we actually pull LinkedIn data within the Altify relationship map. You can actually quickly make those correlations and then assign out those connections. So there is a streamlined mechanism to make that happen. But I would caution that you've got to kind of change the mindset of individuals, that it doesn't have to be in a perfect scenario, but you've got to have at least a basis for that introduction, that opportunity to get more broadly within that account, and I think we do a better and better job at that.
Cool. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to check out the Altify product. It feels like I need to check it out. Okay, if you'll humor me, I think we spend the last 12 minutes. We have some fantastic questions, and we'll kind of just do like a speed round. I'll hit you each with a question, and then I do want to finish off with maybe just some trends that you're all seeing for 2021. Paul, first question go to you. How do you measure the enablement program effectiveness?
That's a very broad question. What can we go specific in terms of what kind of enablement program? There's lots of different types of.
Yeah,
point me.
If you're still with us, Bilal, any further color on that question would be super helpful. I'll try and take a stab at it. What, in the broadest sense, what is your KPI that you're driving towards? Is it like increased win rate? Is it just, increased revenue? What is that?
Yeah, so we have a number, probably like Adrienne and Richard, we have a number of different KPIs, right, that we're aligning our programs to, right? The one phrase that always sticks with me is sales enablement is responsible to sales, not for sales, right? And I love that quote. And I would say we're looking at things like strike ratio, the number of discovery calls and meetings that turn into qualified opportunities at top of funnel. We're looking at contact and coverage, meaningful contact, right? Where a business transformation conversation was had. We're looking at obviously quota attainment month over month. Tracking year to date. We have our performance rankings and curves that come out every month for the sales VPs and all the enablement teams, so we can see where pockets of opportunity are. But the one that I think differentiates TELUS, and the one that I'm most proud of, is our certification program for sales executives that looks at the training they took, how they applied that training in field, And then did it translate and correlate to results? Did they hit Premier Club? Did they go to President's Club? And so the measure of success that I and my team are really focused on is increasing the number of sales certifications across the organization to get those people to become our champions, to evangelize the importance of honing your craft, right? To spending time in coaching conversations, in mentoring, less seasoned sales professionals. And we just had our President's Club last week, Adrian. We just finished our virtual kickoff. And I was taking note of the number of President's Club winners that are certified. And I was, and I do that every year. And to me, that's the greatest indication that we're doing our job when I see 15, 16, 17 people win President's Club that have already been certified through our Telesales Academy. So that to me, Bilal, would be my indicators of success as an organization.
I like that. That's a great indicator. It must be very, very rewarding when you see them get to go. What did President's Club look like this year, by the way?
You know what? Our events team did a fantastic job. It was all virtual. Our enterprise team had a 3-week staggered virtual kind of summit where they did a couple of sessions a day with subject matter experts in different parts of our business speaking. Our mid-market small group did a 1-week kind of sprint, but the celebrations were really well done. They were really produced. They did celebrity cameos. They used Cameo to bring celebrities in to talk to our team. They made it as fun as they could. And whenever someone what came up on the virtual stage, they flipped their camera on and they were at home with their family, made it real, and it was really nice. I give tremendous kudos to our events teams for doing a really good job in a tough circumstance this year.
I like it. It's kind of cool that it's broken down, sort of that third wall between people's families and their personal life and business. There's no, for better or worse, kind of no difference now.
And it'll be interesting, Scott, to see if we go back to like flying 1,000 people into one city, right, and spending those revenue dollars on that kickoff, or can we do a hybrid model? I think the hybrid model is probably going to be the future. I think for a lot of organizations moving forward is my suspect. I suspect.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. In a post-COVID world, I would love to travel and get together with everyone if it's all safe. But I think you're right. I think it'll be a bit of there'll be an option maybe to go and then option to do digital. Okay, here is another question. Richard, I think I'll go with you on this one. It says, with shifting responsibilities between sales and customer success teams, what types of cross-sell opportunities do you see would be typically managed by sales versus CS teams respectively? What is the ideal process to get these teams aligned and capturing more upsell without duplication of effort? Super good question.
Yeah, this is the heart of what we're solving right now. It's interesting. This particular model, customer success folks have an expansion quota, but we haven't allocated a cross-sell quota, and we're really looking for the product specialists that are account executives, along if there's a global account assigned to that account, to be the ones that are really driving that particular cross-sell activity. We are, however, creating a mechanism where they can get credit and quota layoff and credit for a opportunity that they've identified. So we are better enabling them to have the key listening ears, right? Here's what to listen for if you might be able to surface or tease out a cross-sell opportunity. So we're incenting them for that opportunity identification, but they would then work in partnership, surprisingly through the account plan with the account executive and the global account manager to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good way to frame it and help them work sort of collaboratively. They're still got skin in the game. All right, last rapid fire question. This one comes from Ross. Adrian, this one will be for you. what challenge do you see in sellers? Sellers getting into the language point of view of the customer over the point of view of their product. How are you enabling and helping them make that shift?
So that comes back to the coaching and the practice, because at least within our organization, and I don't think we're unique in this, it's hard. When you learn to sell, you typically learn to sell a thing, and you have to really force yourself to think about, instead of talking about the thing that you're selling, that you're asking questions and listening. And we always know that most salespeople like to talk, but their greatest attribute is really that ability to ask smart questions and understand that customer's point of view. And the only way to get them there, it very much is around practice. That's why we have the coaches, in fact, because they will listen into calls and really capture the times when we started to head down the, well, have you thought about this product? Like, no, that wasn't what the conversation was about. You could have asked a better question there. We've found that this is something that we're going to probably be working on for years and years and years, because it's not an easy shift. But if we keep speaking the right language, our entire customer planning initiative actually is based around the concept of customer business initiatives. So those initiatives have to be captured in the customer's words, not in ours. And that's probably the one big thing that we're requiring as part of this change, that we believe will help the mind shift over time.
That's a golden nugget. In the customer's words, not ours. It's easy to hear something and then bucket that quickly into, I've heard that X amount of times, that means this. But it doesn't always mean that. That's just your perception of it. I really like that initiative of making sure it's in the customer's words. All right. We have 3 more minutes, and I want to keep this last question a fun one. In 1 or 2 sentences, if I had a time machine and I was able to transport you back to the day before kind of COVID took over our lives, what advice would you give yourself? And Adrienne, let's start with you.
Well, mine's a really silly answer. Just get the puppy now, Adrienne. That would have been my advice. Because we waited, we kept thinking, well, maybe we'll be back traveling, we won't be home. But we got the puppy. But I just would have got him sooner.
I love that. We did the same thing halfway through. I fought a puppy hard. We got a kitten. I kind of was like, I don't think we could do full puppy. I still had visions of us traveling. We should have just got a puppy too, but we got a kitten. It's been awesome. Paul, what about you? What would you tell yourself?
So in that same vein, I would have bought, 2 things. I would have bought stock in sporting good manufacturers, because that was like everyone cleaned out the shelves and you couldn't get any toys for your children to keep them busy when they were home from school.
You can't get dumbbells. You can't get anything.
So I would have bought like more stuff to keep my 6-year-old busy when I was taking off work in the spring of 2020 to go out inside and play with him, and I didn't have enough stuff to keep him busy when he wasn't in virtual school. So that would have been my takeaway.
I like it. This is a fun panel. Get puppies, get toys. I like it. Richard, same question. Bring us home. What are you telling yourself?
You know, outside of buying Zoom stock, I would have probably not hesitated to book that vacation to Jackson Hole. Just bit the bullet, driven the 8 hours from Colorado up to Wyoming and skied with the family. So that would have been a no-brainer.
Yeah, I like it. I love how everything's central outside of work, which is awesome. The way it should be. It puts the priorities into perspective. Puppies, toys, and vacations. That's what it's all about.
That's right.
Well, Richard, Adrian, Paul, thank you so much. We will have to have you back. That was a super insightful conversation. And for all those who joined us, thank you for the great questions. You made my life easy. Thank you for the thoughtful engagement throughout. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.